Okay, Season 6, Episode 23, called Process. The making of Episode 22, called Retirement. Hey there, listeners. Maybe a newcomer or two. The title might catch someone's eye there. Before I go any further, I just want to make it clear that this episode is not a how-to type creation where I tell you all how to make a podcast episode. I've rubbed elbows with enough fellow podcasters to know that each of us has a personal way of getting those episodes to the finish line, and that my way simply works for me. I am a one-man show. No one helps me at any step in this process. From idea to scheduling, I do everything myself. I'm like that. I could work with someone else, have worked with others in the past, but I'm pretty happy doing things my way without comment or supervision. That's an advantage of being an old fart, I guess. My way is a particularly manual way. I don't use anything that has been labeled as artificial intelligence. No images, no music, no sound effects. I write the scripts, I read them out, I create the transcripts, I create the thumbnails, the drawings, the artwork. I sometimes compose the music, more often use music created by real musicians who have licensed it in Creative Commons. I manually edit the soundtrack, I then manually produce the episode, adding music, sounds, pauses, and rhythm, as well as images, video or still. My tools are various. The hardware I use. My smartphone, which isn't all that smart, that's just what they call it. My fairly powerful laptop, which, by the way, is never on my lap. A nice condenser mic that cost me around 50 euros, I think. I've got a tripod and a small tripod that I use, mostly natural lighting and video recording. Of course, I've got some headphones, the old-fashioned type with a cable to plug in the laptop. The Bluetooth ones have a delay I can't abide with when editing. The software I use is that which I am very acquainted with. I've been using all of these programs for so long that there is no longer much of a learning curve to them. The script is written out online, so I have access to it at all times. Because everything I produce is scripted, using an online platform also means I've got the transcript up and ready from the outset. I used to use WordPress. I've tried out Medium. I'm currently using Substack. Audio recording and basic cleanup editing of the audio track, which is the basis of my work, well, that's done using Audacity. The creation of artwork like text slides, graphic novel type images, and all thumbnail and branding images is done with GIMP. I've also used some font creation software, and for composing I use MuseScore. The core production software I currently use is Sony Vegas Pro. I've been using Sony Vegas for, I don't know, could be 15 years. It took me the better part of those 15 years to feel totally comfortable using this program for the entire production process, from creating the final audio product, through editing a video version, to lifting short material for any promotion I might create. Promotion. Not very often. In the end, everything gets filtered through Sony Vegas, and I wouldn't change it for anything. Now, the title of this episode is Process, and that's what I mainly want to talk about here. Me and my podcasting friends all know that there is a process between the idea for an episode and the broadcasting of that episode to the public. However, we're also pretty sure, or at least I am, that the regular listener has no idea what was involved in getting that final, polished, or sometimes not so polished, episode onto a listening platform, and that's what I wanted to describe for you all here. I will only give a general nod at the end as what happens once the episode is ready for uploading to internet. The example episode I've used that you'll see in the screenshot videos is a type I consider narration of an essay with background music and, for YouTube, unrelated B-roll of Revel doing things. I've got a number of this type of episodes on YouTube. The listener who simply listens doesn't miss the images because they're not at all related, or at least not directly related, to the words being spoken. I do make other types of episodes like
Dramatic with drawings, fiction reading with the text presented in slides, close-ups of Revel's face as he rants at the camera with occasional images.
Kind of like this episode.
Dramatic presentations with voices and sound effects like old-time radio.
Each of those different styles of videos follows the same process, but will be different in how much time is involved. So remember that the hours and minutes I point out in this process are pretty specific to this style of episode. Others may take much longer or much less time. From the notes I took as I produced episode 22, the one called Retirement, this is the basic process order I follow pretty much with all episodes, no matter their general style. Get an idea. Write a script. Review the script. Record the narration. Edit the narration. Film B-roll or create images. Produce the episode. Again, do note that I won't be going too deeply into what happens once the episode is finished. Let's look at each of these steps in the process.
Get an idea. Time is relative.
The episode called Retirement came about specifically because I'd just gone through the process of applying for my retirement pension here in Spain. I'd explained it a bit to my brother on the phone and mainly wanted to keep a record for myself that might also be a little bit helpful for others like me. As has been my wont this season, I limited the title to one word, adding a subtitle that clarified a bit. Managing the Spanish red tape. There's the idea. I had only to sit down with it at the keyboard. Not all ideas come in this fashion. Sometimes my mate will help me out. Other times there is a series of ideas. Because I'm never at a loss for ideas, they have no timestamp on them.
Write a script. 2 hours.
This is a pretty easy process for me. For retirement, I sat down, wrote out what I wanted to say. The essay took me about 2 hours to get to a finished rough draft. That's pretty normal for me. I'm a rewriter by nature. During editing, I end up cutting out more than adding stuff. Writer's block is an urban legend at best, a mental illness at worst, one I don't suffer at all.
Review the script. 1.5 hours.
This step has a couple of functions. Review means that I read the script aloud. While doing this, I'm watching for word choice, awkward phrasing, grammar and spelling, all those copy editing tasks involved as an editor. I'm also practicing the delivery, rehearsing, so to speak, gesturing, trying out intonations and pauses and rhythms. I probably do this 2 or 3 times for any of my episodes. An hour and a half. See what good it does? An hour and a half is a reasonable amount of time for this type of episode. The tally is now at 3 hours and 30 minutes.
Record the narration. 33 minutes.
I gather up my laptop, my mouse, my plug-in headphones, and head upstairs to my studio, which is a guest bedroom with a folding futon, several bookshelves, my studio table, my guitars, a violin, a keyboard, a nice window looking out to the south. The mic is usually on the table there, and the tripod is over there in the corner. I set up the smartphone on the tripod, plug in the mic, open the software, and prepare to record. The whole setup time is probably 10 minutes. But for retirement, there was no filming of the recorded session, so I could sit down and get right to it. For an episode that has about 30 minutes of narration to record, 33 minutes is pretty good. I usually average around 5 minutes of outtakes in any given session. Our tally is now at 4 hours and 3 minutes.
Edit narration. 1 hour, 17 minutes.
Now, I've saved the Audacity recording as a project file, and I've got to go over it before I export the MP3 file I'll be using in the production step. In the case of my filming the recording session, I'll do this during production in Vegas due to the synchronization of soundtracks. If there is no filming, the first thing I've got to do is remove all the outtakes. When I make a mistake recording, I simply say, "No," in a louder tone, so I can catch those bloopers in the sound wave graph visually and cut out those twisted tongue sections. Once that's done, I listen through the entire recording to drop the volume on my breath intakes and tighten up the rhythm of the delivery. I sometimes do this step in one sitting. This time I had to stop about halfway through, so it was 2 sessions. The file is now saved as an MP3 in its designated folder, and our tally is now at 5 hours and 20 minutes.
Film B-roll, 30 minutes.
For this type of episode, I use video I've shot of me doing things. Could be garden work, like me planting seedlings for the vegetable garden or sunflower seeds in those big plastic pots. Could be shots of me drawing. Could be shots of me working on some project in my workshop. Each of those shots that are from 2 to 20 minutes long involves some setup time. I've 30 plus clips filmed this time around, so I count about a minute setup time per clip, bringing the tally now to 5 hours and 50 minutes.
Produce episode, 3 hours and 40 minutes.
This is a massive category that involves several steps. All are done in Sony Vegas, Audacity, and GIMP. I load my MP3 narration file into the episode template I created back at the start of Season 6, a template that includes music, basic images, and measurement slides. I give the narration the final spacing editing, placing the clip in its place and dividing it into sections according to the script. I load the B-roll into that template, now saved as an episode Vegas file, and begin to edit it down to fit sections of narration. I make sure the title cards are correct, make new ones based on templates, check the credit roll at the end, adjust all pauses, music cues, outro material, etc. I go through that work to make sure that everything is in its place for rendering. Up to this point, I've spent 3 hours 40 minutes on production. I then render the audio MP3 for Spotify. That took 1 minute and 12 seconds for this 30-minute episode. I then rendered the video version for YouTube. In this case, the rendering was long. My fault. I adjusted the clips to fast motion too much, and that takes a while. Time for that rendering was around 3 hours. That's not an average render time, it's longish, but it's what it is for this episode. Tallying the entire production process, we've got 3 hours and 40 minutes plus 1 minute plus 3 hours equals 6 hours and 41 minutes production. As I don't have to do anything during rendering except wait, I'm going to leave those 3 hours out of the tally, so we've got 3 hours 40 minutes of production. The final tally from idea to finished product, 9 hours and 30 minutes. Of course, there's so much more involved here time-wise. Those 9 hour 30 minutes don't include any debate I've had with my mate on the content of the episode. They don't include any time I spend thinking about the episode while I'm gardening or drifting off to sleep. Those are 9 hours and 30 minutes I'm sitting at my computer working on the episode itself. And they don't include any of the post-production work. Here's a quick list of those tasks. Write a blurb for uploading to YouTube and Spotify. Make sure attribution and other links are in their places. Upload and schedule to YouTube. Uploads are always done while sleeping, usually takes hours and always takes up bandwidth. Manage the upload the next day, adding the blurb, artwork, clicking through the upload survey. Upload and schedule to Spotify. Doesn't take as long as YouTube, but 15 minutes can't be avoided. Review audio with original script and prepare and schedule the transcript on Substack. On the day of release, drop a post on Blue Sky and repost it from my personal account. Make sure the spreadsheet is up to date with links and episode titles and numbers, etc. And all of that takes another day or so of my time, and remembering to do it. I sometimes get YouTube uploaded but forget Spotify. And because of all those steps, I also spend time in Asana working through to-do lists of steps towards the publication of an episode. What should you, dear listener, make of this? I've said it often in meetings with fellow podcasters. I'm in a podcaster support group on Discord. I'm not at all concerned with the number of subscribers or number of downloads or number of views. I didn't create You're Listening to Radio Revel in order to appease some invisible god of algorithms. My motivations are elsewhere and entirely egocentric. I make the podcast mainly because I like the sound of my own voice. I like making shit like this. It's a personal, creative effort. And that's why You're Listening to Radio Revel is going into hibernation. I'm heading into the uncharted realm of retirement, and realizing that that milestone in my life really does mean something besides a continuance of the semi-retired state I've held since sometime in the late 1980s. Watching my father and mother-in-law age in the way that they are, thinking about my mother's old age, though she died fairly young, only 68, that age will be upon me in July of 2027. Well, I'm starting to reshape my idea of retirement. Instead of that continuance, retirement might actually be some kind of breaking away from the activity that filled my life before. I won't be working, that's for sure, though I will be doing things, just not the things I've been doing up to now. That means that stuff that filled my time before, which includes the garden, the workshop, You're Listening to Radio Revel, those will become my pre-retirement activity, maybe revisited from time to time, but gradually replaced with travel, fishing trips, other creative endeavors, one of which you saw at the beginning of the video version of retirement. I'm not ready to say what it is yet. I'm still fixing the explanation for myself. So, this episode, number 192, after 6 seasons, is at this writing the last episode for You're Listening to Radio Revel. At least for now. I've no plans for a season 7. I may be back to it after a while, only because I miss it, but I'm not even predicting when or if that will happen. I want to give those changes a chance to settle in before I take up the mantle of one-man show podcasting again. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to me. I've enjoyed making the podcast a lot. But it's true, I'm looking forward to what happens when I'm not making the podcast. Cheers. There's lots of bloopers in this one to take advantage of. Using an online platform also means I've got the transcript. No. Sorry. Phlegm in the throat. No. I follow pretty much with all episodes now. No. And begin to edit it down to fit. No. I like making this shit like this. No. I make the podcast. No. I make the No. I'm headed into uncharted realm. No. When I make a mistake recording, I simply say, no, in a louder tone so I can catch those bloopers in the sound wave graph visually and cut those out. No. When I make a mistake, there you have it. When I make a mistake recording, I simply say, no, in a louder tone so I can catch those bloopers in the sound wave graph.
You're listening to Radio Revel.